As much as I love the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rule set for just how streamlined it is, sometimes it feels like it's just a bit too simple. And what I mean by that is because the rules were written so they could be as streamlined and as user-friendly as possible, it can feel a little bad putting some of these rules into practice. Welcome to the Meta Magics channel. I am your Game Master, and today I'm going to go through my 5 favorite house rules that I use in my D&D 5e games. Now, if this is your first time here and you want to see more videos on everything 5th edition, then be sure to subscribe. And if you want to have a more in-depth conversation on house rules, homebrew in general, or even just D&D in general, then be sure to drop by my Twitch stream. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Link to that in the description below. So, let's talk house rules. Now, a quick note that while these 5 rules are not necessarily in any particular order, these are the 5 that stood out most to me as a must include in all of the games that I run. It should be also noted that I did not come up with all of these rules. Some of these I came up with myself. However, I have taken some ideas from other notable game masters. And if there are house rules that are not on this list that you play with at your table, please let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking to add new rules to my own game. So with that, let's jump right in at number 5. Mental bonus actions. Now, this house rule is mainly meant for during combat. However, in the player's handbook, it states that whenever you want to take any sort of skill check in combat, you need an action to do it. So the house rule I came up with was, if the skill check requires your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, it uses a bonus action instead of an action. And if you want to take something like an athletics check for a grapple or an acrobatics check, etc., using a physical skill like dexterity or strength, it still requires an action. Now, my reasoning behind using this rule is that if you want to make a perception check in combat, your entire turn is essentially spent doing something like this. And that just feels bad. I think that using your entire turn to look at something or think about something in combat feels really bad when you have to do it. I think it just gives the players a little bit more freedom with how they can take their turns, and that's why I like using that rule. Moving on to number 4, we have another one that's in the same vein as the previous rule, and that is self-use items as a bonus action. Now, this rule I first noticed being used in Critical Role Season 1, where Matt essentially lets the players use health potions as a bonus action in combat if they use it on themselves. So I decided I wanted to take that idea for a rule and expand it to include basically any item that you can use as long as you use it on yourself becomes a bonus action instead of an action. Again, it follows that same principle of just giving players more freedom to take their turns and have a bigger impact when they do take their turns. Now, I still play with the rule as when a character uses a health potion on another character that is, for instance, downed, that takes an entire action. But anything that you can use yourself on yourself, bonus action. Giving the players more to do on their turns as well as keeping the game moving by making actions go faster in combat, that's a win-win. This rule does not, however, apply to magic items that require an action to cast a spell or use an ability, as those items are entirely balanced around the current existing action economy. Moving on to number 3, we have intelligence score bonuses. Now, what this rule does is it essentially encourages players to build their characters in a bit of a different way by encouraging points to be put into intelligence for small and not broken bonuses. I did cover this rule in the Dragon Plus 20 house rules for D&D video. If you haven't seen it yet, go check that out. And in that rule, it is stated that for each +1 bonus to intelligence, a player character gets an additional language learned or a new skill proficiency. However, I think you could expand this rule to do something like give martial classes a single cantrip that they can use if they have like a +3 to their intelligence. It could encourage some really diverse character building, because being honest, most people just take intelligence as their dump stat, and this is a really good way to prevent that from happening. It's not a broken rule, it's flavorful, that's why I like it. Moving on to number 2, and this one I use just so I don't have to police my players throughout the entire game, and that is no material components for casting. Now, I use this rule again because I don't want to have to ask my players every time they want to cast something if they have a very specific material component, otherwise they can't cast that. However, there is a caveat that goes with this, and that is if the spell description has a GP cost to cast it. For example, spells like Revivify or True Resurrection have a certain cost worth of material components to cast. The way I run this is, if it has a gold cost of components to cast the spell, they need to use that gold right away as if they already had the component. I think this rule just gives the players a much easier time with inventory management, and it gives me less things to keep track of during the game when I'm just trying to run things. So that's just another win-win all around for everybody. And finally, we end on rule number 1, tangible stealth checks. The vagueness of the 5e stealth mechanic is very annoying to deal with both as a player and as a DM. When the characters go into a dungeon, you don't know when to roll stealth, when to roll perception for the enemies, or to use their passive perception for the enemies. There's just so many variables that you have to make the call on every time you want to run stealth in a dungeon. But with the tangible stealth rule, you would roll stealth only when a monster is about to see the player character. So to break this down it works like this. The characters go into a dungeon, and unless they say otherwise, you assume that they are trying to travel stealthily. So if the characters are trying to traverse their way through a bunch of hallways, you don't have to think about their stealth checks or stealth rolls, etc. But if they want to go into a room where an enemy would see them, the players would then roll their stealth, the enemies would then roll their perception, and you go from there. This rule just makes the overall concept of stealth make more sense, at least it does to me, and that's why I use it. Keeps the game going, makes the rules more understandable, more fun for everyone. And those are my top 5 house rules for running in any D&D 5e game. If you feel like there were any rules that I specifically missed that you play with that should be on this list, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them. Or if you have any reason for why these rules are completely awful ideas to run with, please let me know in the comments as well. I also have a list of 5 or more house rules that you definitely want to avoid running in your own games, as I have experience playing with them to some very poor results. So if you want to see that video, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, guys, happy gaming.